of the nephrons, right? And so these are just jam-packed with nephrons. The renal columns that are between them, these are where these arteries are that eventually feed into the nephrons. So this is really the arteries, and then that's really the nephrons within the pyramid. Now, as you know now, then the tubular fluid basically goes through, all the tubules, gets into collecting ducts, and eventually ends up into these structures here called calyxes or calyces. The calyxes then feed into this large structure, which is the renal pelvis. And the renal pelvis then leads you to the ureter right here. And so this is, on this model here, kidneys, this would be, your renal pelvis right here on the outside. The glow-in-the-dark tubes are going to be the ureters, and then they're feeding into our urinary bladder. So for the urinary bladder, if you look inside, you see this white triangle. That's the trigon. The trigon is just the region that it's got the ureteral openings or ureteral orifices really at the two edges. And you can see that's just where the ureter feeds into this. Right, so that's how the urine is filling up inside the bladder. And then really the opening here is going to be the urethra. And so the trigon really has two ureteral openings and then the urethra at the other end. The detrusor muscle, really the whole thing is the detrusor muscle. The urinary bladder is just made up of this smooth muscle called the detrusor. All right, so now we need to go on to the urethra. So we'll do, for the female, it's a lot simpler because it's just shorter. So on this model too, you can also see the urinary bladder. And so right here's the urethra. For the males, you've got different regions along the urethra, and then you have to memorize the names of those regions. So for example, on this, let's take one that's already apart. Okay, so this is a good one. So obviously the major difference here with the males is that the urethra is longer. So the urinary bladder enters in, so this is where the urethra begins. When the urethra goes through the prostate gland, that's the prostatic urethra. And then when the urethra goes through this layer of muscle right here, that's the membranous. Then the urethra goes through the penis, and that's the penile urethra. So pretty self-explanatory there. And then for both of these, really the ending, so the external urethral opening is really just the end of the line. Same thing for female. Let's see. Oh, I guess we didn't cover the details on that. So this whole thing here is a renal corpuscle, and inside is the ball of capillaries that make up the glomerulus. So really this whole ball of capillaries is the glomerulus. The whole corpuscle is then made up of this outer shell called Bowman's capsule, or the glomerular capsule. So that's just the outer shell of the corpuscle. Then the other ones that you want to learn in this model, so you've got the larger arteriole that's entering in, that's the afferent, number 6. Then the smaller arteriole that takes the blood away, that's the efferent, number 7. Okay, so just remember this is the wider diameter, so that's the afferent. Then on this middle one, so this is the one we'll use for the different regions of the tubule. So first thing you have on here, here's one of your individual nephrons, which is really one of these corpuscles, which has, again, it's got that glomerulus in there. Well, the first portion of the tubule that you reach is the proximal convoluted tubule. You know it's proximal because it's closest to the corpuscle. Then the tubule descends. All right, so this is the descending nephron loop, goes into the medulla, and then it ascends and comes back to the cortex. Once you get to this region right here, you're at the distal convoluted tubule. It's convoluted, it's a tubule, and it's, at least lengthwise, it's distant to the corpuscle. And then this one right here down the middle, this is the collecting duct, which receives urine from multiple nephrons. Okay, so collecting duct. Any questions on urinary? All right, on to reproductive.